Hey guys, Jacob Wynn here, and welcome to Wide World of Punting Episode 8, where we break down everything and anything in the world of punting. Tonight on the show, starting with Behind Bookie Lines with Tristan from Top Sport. Last week he talked about $1 million bets and $1 million plus liability bets that they've had to face. This week he's giving real life examples of actual punters who found an edge across different sports and beat them, and he's going to explain how. Then I've got a segment that you guys voted for, which is you want to know how to identify a really good tipster. So I'm going to talk specifically about subscription services, red flags to look for, and also what to look for to be confident that it's worth parting with your money to pay for somebody's tips. Then I've got a special treat, a couple of Cameo boxing picks. It's fight night tonight in Sydney, and we've got the Gallen Hunt fight as well as the Tszyu Morgan fight. And I've got a couple of well-known tipsters from our group sharing just less than 60 seconds their pick for each of those fights. And then, of course, I've got the Wide World Bet of the Week trying to bounce back for this week, and it's going to be on the NFL. Let's get into it with Behind Bookie Lines and Tristan talking about punters that have found an edge over the years.
There's multiple ways you can have an edge, and obviously there's your opinion against the bookie's opinion. Obviously, the marketplace is an opinion. So when a price is set, especially early in the piece, which is why the limits are less, early doors, it's because it's a couple of bookies' opinion that the marketplace puts up, and customers are very quick to bring their opinions out to try to beat the market, and many of them are successful at doing so. But I don't think that's really where I want to head down today. I'd like to sort of focus on a couple of edges where we probably set a market and how we had our opinion on things, and we probably missed a couple of a couple of key points when we were setting these markets for an extended period of time, and customers were able to take advantage of that. And it was nothing untoward. It was just we missed a key ingredient in setting these markets. We've been around for 15 years. We've evolved a long time over that period. And we're trying to bring out new markets all the time, and you do miss a couple of nuances when you're bringing things out. One of the key ones early was one of the first markets we released when we were back in the early days was the first set score. And in the tennis,
and this is tennis,
I'm referring to. Tennis I'm referring to. Obviously, when in every tennis game they have a toss, and whoever serves first, if there's only going to be one break of serve in a match, if a player is serving first, it's more likely they're going to win 6-3, and it's quite hard for them to win 6-4, and vice versa. If a player is receiving first, it's very hard for them to win 6-3, and it's quite it's highly more probable for them to win 6-4. So we obviously were aware of that, but what the big edge some customers were able to get over the top of us was that there were many players that, regardless, that if they won the toss, they were always going to serve. And the other player, if they were going to win the toss, they were always going to receive. So regardless of which way that toss fell, the 6-3 or the 6-4 was very likely for certain players. And that was something where we were constantly getting beaten on these markets for an extended period of time, and we couldn't work out what was going on. We'd adjust the market after the toss, but then it clued in, and obviously you've got your big servers and those sort of things. So that was a really interesting one where something as simple as that, our customers were able to pick up on it. And I believe it was around the marketplace as well, because we were, back in those days, we weren't as heavily model-based as what we are now, and we were more so using the market prices as a guide for these sort of things. And I believe the whole market was a bit slow to react to that, and I'm sure a lot of punters made a lot of money out of something as really basic as that, which is pretty cool when you think of it. It's a very genuine sort of thing, and it's something that even now we still have difficulty when players are coming up through the lower ranked games. So for punters out there that are looking to sniff around at a few different things, if you can find some of those players that are coming through the Challenger circuit, the ITF circuit, that potentially bookies maybe don't have as much data on it as what they do, the top-ranked players, there still is a possibility there to be onto that one.
That's a really interesting one. I've never heard that one. And Alex, who I formerly did the pod with for 6 years, was a former professional tennis player. Right. And he loved betting on a bit of tennis. And he, I don't think he even knew that one. What you're saying is basically that, you're thinking whoever serves first, most common first set score is going to be 6-3, right? Yeah. But if they win the set, and if they lose the set, the most common score is going to be 6-4, and you're thinking, well, the toss is going to dictate that. But if you historically knew certain players, for whatever reason, prefer to receive in the first game if they win, and if they were coming up against somebody who prefers to serve, then the punter already knew who'd be serving first in the first set. So whoever they wanted to win, or they could probably back both. They could probably back player A 6-3 or player B 6-4 and probably be profitable just on that information.
Oh, for sure, and that was happening a lot. You were getting these, these punters that were backing both of those options, and we're saying, well, the game's 2 hours away. Surely the toss hasn't occurred at this point, and yeah, we're probably a little bit slow on the uptake to get that one out. But you're exactly right, and obviously there were plenty of instances where the game went to a tiebreaker. There were a couple of break of serves, so it wasn't foolproof, but those markets were generally set where those two price points were around about that $5 mark, and in reality, they probably should have been $3.75, $3.50 instead of $5. So it was a significant edge there, and it was giving basically a punters a sort of 10 to 15% edge in those sort of markets, which is pretty valuable over when you know how many games of tennis there are over the course of the year. You can sort of chip away at that and be quite profitable over an extended period of time.
Another parallel that springs to mind, which again is not foolproof, but it's like in the NFL, the vast majority of teams defer when they win the kickoff or when they win the toss, so they elect to receive the ball second half. But if you knew that in a rare case a team preferred to take the ball, you pretty much knew who would start with the ball, and that would then, I guess, if you wanted to bet like team to score first or first quarter markets, that basically is a factor that has not been priced into the market, and therefore you can find an edge.
Oh, for sure, and definitely in those high scoring matchups, where it is likely a team's going to probably score on that first drive. That is a definite edge, and it's very easy. And that's what punters, as we were talking about last week, it's about evolving, and there's so many new markets coming out these days that bookies are trying to get as many markets out as possible, and they can't be as efficient as what they are on the ones they've set for 10, 15 years. So you just have to think of ways that you feel, where you can get the amount of data and say, well, if this is just looks like it's based off the match betting, but the outside is expected to get the ball first, then it's worth a bet. So there's plenty of still opportunities to have a crack at those sort of things, and it's just trying to be aware enough to know where the opportunities lie.
I'll actually throw one back here that springs to my mind, which I found absolutely fascinating. It was a syndicate in America that identified a real edge, and this is because you brought up that like you can't possibly account for every single possible edge that goes into a game, and you like to think that you've accounted for the major ones, but there's always going to be edges out there for punters to find. These guys found that there was real, I can't remember, is it called circadian rhythm with your sleep patterns, and basically there was a real disadvantage for West Coast teams that played on the East Coast in the NFL in the early time slot because their body clock would literally have them being like 10 a.m. in the morning, and they're going to have to be primed to, physically compete at the highest level when they're not used to being prime at that time. And now it's like quite commonly known, and you almost like there's almost an extra point of value for the West Coast team heading east and playing early. But these guys weren't even football experts and were making money all through the early 2000s, so I've heard, just purely betting teams in that situation because, who would have thought of that sleep pattern would be a real factor, but it proved to be profitable. I think they were hitting, high 50%, maybe 60% against the spread just on that factor.
Yeah, and those opportunities arise all the time. Particularly, I'm sure there would have been a lot that we haven't even become aware of over the COVID situation, where there were so many differences. Where if you can think of things that are outside of that market parallel, if you can think, oh well, a team's got to back up or play X number of games over a certain amount of periods, or they're not going to be able to train, or these sort of things. It's a key thing. Like I play a little bit of social sport, and I'm not very good at any of it. But if you do something small, if you have the Christmas party the night before and you have a few beverages and you have to roll into a game and you're not doing your normal sort of thing, obviously you're not going to perform at that level. And when you're performing at the highest level, even small little change ups in routine, they can be so huge. And if people can become aware of that, it's really impressive. And that's where I suppose we're a little bit different to a lot of other bookmakers. If people are able to identify that, and there's absolutely that's absolute fair play. If people can find edges in those sort of situations, we tip our cap to them and say, well, that's impressive. We try to work out what they're doing. If we'd probably notice a customer in that sort of situation betting these certain teams. We noticed a while back, a few years ago, there were a lot of customers that were very, very successful taking the favourites minus a spread away from home, and it seemed like the market forces really pushed for the outsiders at the plus. So the outsiders at the plus when they were at home, it probably overcompensated for the good teams. And we noticed a couple of customers betting purely on these scenarios, and they were running at the high 50s, low 60s as well. But it only takes a little tweak in how the prices are set for those edges to disappear. So you need to really be able to price up the market well. You need to be able to understand that, okay, this has worked for me for for this season. But if the bookmakers catch onto it and they tweak the prices by that point, you've got to know when that edge disappears and when to stop betting and when to look for something else. It's all about that evolution, as we were talking about last week.
And I think it's a gold mine if you can find a factor that just you can blindly play and profit from. But that's very rare. In my experience, if you can find these little things where maybe it's hard to quantify how much of an edge I'm gaining, but if it's on my side and it adds to a handicap where I already like it, then I get extra confidence, a little bit of a free roll. Like, I heard that this team had a Christmas party last night. I have no knowledge of how many beers each of them had or how much sleep they got, but I already was, looking to bet against them the next day anyway. And now I've got that information. Now I'm stronger. Whereas if the team I wanted to bet on, I heard they were out partying last night. Well, now maybe I'm not automatically going to bet against them, but maybe I stay away because it's not combining into my edge. What about golf? You mentioned that you've been beaten in golf. Can you explain that story?
Yeah, so the key one that springs to my mind is we obviously bet on the outright winner markets, which are very liquid markets. It's very hard to find an edge in those sort of things. People do, but that's more so an opinion-based thing. We were building a lot of trios and group bettings and matchups based on that market. So back in the day when Tiger probably wasn't at his best, and Patrick Harrington was another one that came to mind. They were both these major winners, but week in, week out, they weren't as competitive as what they had been 5 or 6 years ago. But basically, the outright winner market had them priced in the market at a lot less than their data would suggest. Because if they got in contention to win an event, obviously with their experience and their history, if they were playing well, then they're probably going to be more likely to find a way to win. So there were occasions when, say, Tiger, for example, might have been 50-1 to win an event back when he was struggling a little bit. We would grab our trios and our groups, and those markets would be set based on players at around about the same price point. So it would be 2 other players at 50-1, where those players would finish higher than Tiger in many, many more events than he would finish higher than them. Although the probability of winning the actual tournament was the same, we were getting picked off on those trios and those group bettings week in, week out, where punters were betting against the likes of Patrick Harrington, Tiger, these sort of things for the reasons I mentioned above. And we couldn't work out why again. And then we made a tweak where we actually tweaked the odds from looking at our outright market to looking at our top 20 market. And Tiger was then maybe he was $3 in that sort of scenario. And the guys that he were originally priced up against were at $2.50. So it shifted him back to a different group of players where they might have been 80 or 100-1 to win the event outright, and that sort of removed that edge. But we had one customer in particular that cleaned us up and won a very, very significant amount of money off just that pure strategy, which makes a lot of sense in hindsight.
It does make a lot of sense. It brings a smile to my face to hear. As you were explaining it, I said, oh, of course. It's like you've got to put Tiger Woods at 50-1, even if he's out of form, because he's got that high ceiling and, he's got that class. And not to mention, he's going to attract money. There's going to be people that bet on that high profile, almost regardless what their odds are. So you'd be inclined to not, give out extra value and if anything, shade them in a bit. Whereas you've got these other players that are 50-1 just because they're far more consistent. And they've never shown, an ability to win a major or whatever. And they've never demonstrated that high ceiling. But as you say, if you run that tournament 20 times, they're probably going to shoot better than Tiger, 15 of them. But it's just that Tiger, might be in the mix to win it once or twice more than them. So to bet on them, in a derivative kind of head-to-head or in a trio is very clever. I like that as well. And I also like how you see somebody's winning and you're looking at what type of bets they're putting on, and then you're trying to figure out, are they just lucky? Do they just, really know their golf, or are they picking up something that we're mispricing here?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, again, we take on all winners, we take on all players, and we're trying to make our market sharper. We're trying to learn, like what punters are. Every time we set a market, we want it to be the true price. We want it to be something we're confident in taking strong bets on. So if we find something where we are getting beaten regularly, then we're wanting to look at reasons for that. And then it's amazing when that light bulb goes off in your head and you actually work out what's going on here. It's a good feeling, but it's also a ordinary feeling when you look back at the P&L of those markets over the last however long it took you to find a little edge.
You can just imagine, geez, this guy was making money off us for, months before we realized. Yeah. But it's like, yeah, I didn't know what these edges were going to be before you explained it. So even I'm having the light bulb moment as you explain. I'm going, wow, yeah, wish I thought of that. And that is where collective IQ helps as well. We've got a punting group and it's stuff. Sometimes you find an edge, it's like almost too good to share. If it gets too widely known, that's where the bookies probably get tipped off.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And I know a lot of punters want to, there'd be so many more edges out there at the moment that we're not aware of that punters are making a lot of money on. And they're obviously not going to want to give away the advantage they have. There's no issue with them tipping something out after they've backed it, but they won't put a lot of reasoning into it. A lot of punters do share their information, and that's really good. A lot of the punters that I know that are very, very successful fly under the radar. You wouldn't know how successful they are because they just go about their business. They're not in it for the ego. They're not in it for the pats on the back. They're just doing their thing. And it's amazing how many of them are out there that people just are unaware of.
And we talked earlier about winning the toss, or at least you thinking that should directly dictate the odds in a tennis set. Of course, the toss is also very important in cricket. And with the Big Bash started up last week, failed with my Wide World tip of the week. I picked Brisbane, and they were absolutely horrendous on Friday. And then I thought they were going to win last night, but no. That's just Brisbane doing Brisbane Heat things. But I digress. The toss in the Big Bash is about half an hour before the game starts up. I'm not sure if that's similar for longer forms of cricket, but I've always thought, and I actually alluded to this when I chatted to Andrew last week, that I did actually find an edge betting team totals under on the team that once I knew that they were betting second, because they were always limited by how much the first team scored in a Big Bash context. But you've also had punters that have been taking advantage of the toss and the edge that provides in the cricket.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll firstly touch on the bet of the week last week. We finally got a little bit back from you. You've been very sharp over the first start of this campaign. The punters who were on the Heat, though, they'll probably take a little bit of solace knowing that one of our bigger cricket punters had a very sizable bet on the Thunder last night when they were at big odds when they looked dead in the water, and they came back and won. So even though the Heat did us a bit of a good deed in game one, we certainly weren't happy with them last night because one of the punters had 30 or 40,000. He had 30 or 40,000 on them. We'll go back to the edges we find with the cricket, and the toss is very, very key for the cricket. And obviously we've got the three formats of cricket: T20, one-day cricket, and also Test cricket, and they all have different variables. And there's so many different things that change. It's not a black or white answer. Like with the IPL, for example, over in India, the toss was so important for the games. I think it might have been when it was the earlier games in the night when the Tszyu was around, and there were records that were coming up where teams batting second just had such a better chance of winning the games and these sort of things. So it changes at different venues, in different formats, in different countries, and it's very, very difficult to stay on top of it. There's some very, very sharp cricket punters out there. It's a sport that it's all database driven. It's all numbers driven. Like if you're a punter and you know your numbers, you can get a significant edge in cricket. We're constantly trying to combat these sort of things, and obviously there's the obvious ones that teams more or less likely to win a game based on the outcome of the toss. Some of the things that we've really sort of been trying to work out, and we're still working on at the moment as we speak, is we have 250 sub-markets on every cricket game. There's things like the first 15 overs, your batting matchups, your number of fours, your number of sixes, the market you touched on, the total runs. We actually only offer the total under and over runs on the team that's going to bat first. So we offer both teams in our market. But we say, for example, Brisbane Heat must bat first, Sydney Thunder must bat first, and we set the line because, as you say, it takes away the opportunity it can take away the opportunity for a team to go overs if they've got no possibility of doing that. So we think that's the fairest option. It's very clear for the punters on that. For a prospective punter out there that's looking for an edge, when you see a new market come out, I would suggest have a look at it and say, okay, what could potentially be something that factors this market that maybe the bookies haven't thought of, and just run some numbers, run some scenarios yourself. Say, okay, if this team wins a toss and bats, are they more or less likely, in my opinion, to do that? Are they more or less likely to do this? And there's so much data on the likes of the cricket websites now that you can test your hypothesis and go out there and say, well, this is what I think. I can look at the numbers and say, am I right? And if you are, then maybe start betting into it and see if you can turn that into a bit of profit.
And that sounds a lot like Andrew, who I had on the show last week, where he said, I'm just going to go about my work on my own and gather all my information and figure out, how many boundaries I think are going to be hit by different teams at different grounds, bake it all together into a model and see if my model has more intelligence than what the bookies have. And you may actually find an edge because you guys, as you said, every one cricket game has 250 markets. You can't possibly be putting in that much level of man hours into each market as what one punter can if they specialize. And to go back to your point about, I guess, uncertainty, like I think that is a big weapon of the punter. I always like when there's more uncertainty. So there's a rule change. There's a key players traded if we talk about American sports, or you never like to see injuries, but when there's big personnel changes in teams, that is often where now there's not really much sample size data that's very predictive of what's going to happen next, and that's where there's uncertainty in how you can price it. And that's where if you feel strongly about something, you can have an edge against the bookies.
If you have got the ability on the punt to be successful and to make it work, then you should be looking at trying to really grow out those genuine edges. Because as I said, if someone beats us, like the three I pointed out earlier with the tennis, the cricket and the golf, those punters still bet with us now. We've fixed those things, but they're still looking at ways to beat us, and we were never upset with the way that they were able to do that because it was a genuine edge. They were playing fair play. There was no dramas, and they found a way to beat our prices. There's thousands of customers that do that with us. We've got a very heavy database of customers that can beat us over an extended period of time, and we've got no issue with them. I applaud them because I love seeing punters go out there and find a way to beat us because it means we have to continually improve our product. And as we grow and as we get bigger, those customers help us to facilitate our markets to be a really, like your likes of Pinnacle, who have got the sharpest markets out there in the world. That's something we really try to emulate. So as you say, like it's trying to find a way to improve your own betting ability to make the game as fun and as profitable as it can possibly be.
That's right, because at the end of the day, if you're not finding an edge or you're not betting with some sort of factor in mind that you either think is not accounted for or is over accounted for, then you're betting into a market where, it's 50-50, but it's $1.90 on each side. And obviously you don't make money long term unless there's something within that that's providing value to you on your given selection. So that is actually, for a lot of punters, the great challenge and where you get a lot of enjoyment is analyzing the games and watching, and whether you're a data person or whether you're just like watching whatever body language or reading information. There's many edges out there that are being uncovered every day, and you hear stories about the bloke that fleeced Sportsbet with his AFL disposals. If you heard about that one, not hit 40 disposals. Or you mentioned in golf, there's a famous story of these guys who realized that bookies were overpricing the odds of any single golfer having a hole-in-one at a tournament, and they traveled around the country in England betting at every betting shop, and doing multis on hole-in-ones at golf courses, and absolutely cleaned up across the country over a season of golf. So that is, I guess, that's where it's still, these edges don't guarantee you any success, but they might give you inherent value, and then you still need a bit of luck, still need the result to go your way.
Oh, exactly, and that's the thing. No matter, like the tennis one we were referring to at the start of the show, it didn't guarantee that a player was going to win 6-3 or 6-4, but it meant that if we were pricing an option up at $5, it should be say $3.50 or $3.75. That percentage that's in your favour is going to be so significant over a long period of time. All you need to do, like the best punters that bet with us, turn over a significant amount of money. They might win 5%, 3 or 5%, and people say, I'm trying to win 100% or whatever the case is. It's impossible over a long period of time. You've got to look and just try to find a way. If you're breaking square, try to push yourself to a 1% edge or a 1.5% edge. Look for these things, and as you say, it doesn't guarantee a win. But if you're confident and you've got the data to back up that model, and you're betting into tennis, for example, where there's hundreds of games a day, then that little percent that's in your favour, it's going to add up every single time. It's like spinning the roulette wheel. The casino, we've got the roulette wheel where there's, it's 50-50, but there's the number 0 in there. And that's where they make the edge. They've got that little bit of edge in their favour that they spin that roulette wheel. hundreds, thousands of times a day, and all they're doing is trying to pick off that little bit of margin. For the punters, have to think of it in that way. I may not win on every single one of these bets I place, and you won't win on every single one of those bets, but you have to stick with your strategy. You have to be careful about your staking, and you need to make sure that you're just picking off, you're inversing that roulette wheel, and you're making it work for you.
So thanks for everyone who voted on the poll in the Tripod group this week. I left it open to you guys. Let's talk some punting theory. And the most commonly voted for topic was what makes a good tipster. So I was actually going to refer back to advice. We've done about 20 Punting 101 live videos on the Tripod page. I think we did them 2017 to 2019. And I thought I'll look back because I've covered this topic. And you know what? I looked back at a video I did about paid subscription services and what to look for in a legit one, and also a word of warning about many non-legit ones. And I was going to rehash that for this pod, but I actually thought I said it pretty well back in 2018. So what you'll see next is actually a snippet from that video, from a live video when I went onto the page in 2018 talking about subscription services and what to look for in a good tipster. Now, I will just preface this by saying definitely not against subscription service providers. I get along really well with a handful of guys that I know do it, and I respect anyone that can make a genuine income sharing tips, because I know how hard it is providing tips at all, let alone people paying you to make them money. But this next segment is just some food for thought. Look, as we know, there are lots of different, Facebook pages, email services, whether it be group chats, definitely plenty of characters out there that are going to be more than willing to give you betting tips in exchange for money. And the question is, is it worth it? And of course, especially if they're really good at their marketing, a lot of these services look really appealing. You're going to see all over Facebook or wherever it may be, we're up this many, hundreds of units. We've got this winning percentage. We've won, X number of bets in a row. So today, I'm not really going to come out and say, don't ever pay for tips. I mean, as a blanket rule, if you live your punting life under that mantra that you don't pay for tips, you're probably going to do okay, for a lot of the reasons that I'll get into. But I will give you a lot of the kind of red flags, or a lot of things to at least check before you hand over your hard-earned money, with these subscriptions. So it's come about because a lot of people see these really appealing, displays of great units, and what does it all mean, and how good are they really, and what to look out for. Because firstly, when you see that a punter, any punter, is up so many units, you've got to firstly be careful, because a lot of people throwing around very different definitions of what a unit is. So, at the pod, we give out our 50-50 best bets, and we talk about never having, more than 2 or 3% of your overall bankroll. And when we define bankroll, that is the full amount of money that you can be willing to lose. So that would be, this is an amount of money I'm putting aside for a season or for a year of betting. If I am to lose the lot, that does not affect my quality of life. But that is an amount of money that I'm going to be investing, and I understand that punting can be high risk investing. And obviously the more that you're willing to put in, the more that you'll get out. But then, because we can't guarantee we're going to win every single tip, and no tipster can, and that's obviously one red flag if they're trying to say that they can guarantee a winner, and I will talk about that when you get those private messages of fixed games and things like that. There's obviously the opportunity that bets can lose, and not just one bet can lose, but there's nothing really ever protecting you from losing multiple bets in a row, no matter how good you are, other than control of your unit size. So that's where we say if you put no more than 2 to 3% per best bet, that's going to protect you from that downswing, but it's still a decent enough amount of your overall bankroll that will grow if you are getting the results. And we've shown, our results over the last 4 years. And I said, there was an NBA tipster. I don't want to get into any naming names in this short video. But, we're up 50 units today. We were up 100 units yesterday. And when you look a little closer, I mean, there's 10 units, per tip. And the risk is that, it only takes one bad day. And then if you're down 50 units or 100 unit, if you think of one unit as one of your typical bets, so I usually put, $100 on a bet, and then someone's telling you to put 10 units on, or if they lose 100 units in a day, then have you lost $10,000? You probably aren't putting, $10 10 times your normal bet because someone says something's 10 units. So then when they do, display their results, it's going to sound great when it's a huge amount of units, but it all comes back down to what percentage of your bankroll are you actually playing with. And we spoke about, if you want to say that the pod best bets are, 8 units per best bet, then I think we worked out that we're up close to 30,000 units in 4 years. So you can play around with numbers a lot. That's the point that I want you guys to take away from this, is basically the first step in looking at any tipster is, are their results legit? So if you see a sponsored post on Facebook or you stumble across any type of tipping service, no matter what the results say they are and you're intrigued, your first step's got to be just trying to validate, is this real, or is someone just saying that they're up, $20,000 on this season, or they're up this many units, or we've won this percent. But it could be fake, Sometimes if something seems too good to be true, it often is. And, there's been that many scams that you want to check, And I know obviously we're going to jump into the comments and read, and often there's people commenting, oh, thanks, turned my life around, oh, made so much money. And, something that we've seen a lot of them do is they'll get on with their fake accounts, and it's all these fake testimonials. And when you look a little closer at the likes and stuff, there's some peculiar names that you have never come across, and obviously that's a red flag that it's not legit. I mean, other things they do, they'll post heaps of tips on their Facebook page, but they hide the post, and then they only unhide the winning post. So if you, like the winning tips, so if you go along their page, it'll seem like, oh yeah, they tipped all these results before the event, but that's because they were hidden and you've only stumbled across the page like everybody else has after the fact. Obviously, not much stopping them deleting their losers. You get the fixed match tipsters where they'll just tell, 100 people all different variations of the result and that it's a fixed result. And then obviously, if it's a 50-50, then half of the people they've told they're going to be right. And then they can tell all those people, oh, and here's my next fixed result. This match is going to be a draw, or this match is going to be a win, or whatever. And after a few winners, people might actually start thinking, wow, there's something to this, and dole out their money. But of course, it's just a numbers game to them. They're hitting people up, completely cold in messages, telling them that it's fixed, and it's really, the joke's on you. So there are lots of ways that these guys do come about. We've been, publicly sharing our tips for 4 years, but I've been involved in punting for a lot longer than that. And, literally seen hundreds of these kind of services. There's plenty of people out there that are more than happy to take your money. So, but I think, one thing that's going to separate them, if they are legit and if they are good, is a bit of longevity too, because you need to understand that, it's punting and we have ups and downs, and anybody, literally anybody, even a monkey, tapping on on a typewriter, or if it's 50-50 picks, they can stumble onto a winning streak. And what you will see, I think a lot of these, individuals out there or groups, they can just start off a page. If they get hot, especially if they have an early hot streak, they can promote themselves well. They can show, look here, we started up. Look here, here's how we're killing it on this season. They'll rake in that subscription fee. Then they'll try and keep that streak going as long as they can. They can chase their losses as much as they can. If they're losing, all the excuses are there. Oh, it's just a bit of a downswing. We'll be back. Eventually, it dries up and the numbers kind of present themselves. The truth of the matter is that they're not even profitable. But it's a bit late. Everyone's already coughed up their money, and these guys can just disappear. And that's my point, that, of all the hundreds of tipping services that we've seen over the years, how many of them have actually lasted very long? And often, if they don't, it's because they actually never were really truthfully, displaying an edge against the bookies. But what they were doing was just marketing well off a small sample size. So sample size is huge. If someone's got really good results or a good winning percentage, whatever it may be, you got to see how many weeks, months, how many tips are they displaying this edge over the bookie. The greater that sample size is, the more confidence you can have. And if you've got the Tripod app, you can look at any tipster and it displays what odds they're winning at, displays what percentage they're winning at. It also shows what number of tips they've given out. And that's equally important. That's the other thing I want you guys to take away from this is no one number is going to truly define how good somebody is. There's a whole kind of story, and there's, multiple bits of information that you want to be definitely satisfied with if you actually do find someone worthy of paying a small percentage. At the end of the day, it's your own profit margin you're paying to somebody else if you're going to be buying their tips. So then let's say they check out, they actually are legit, they've actually got a big sample size. All right, well then you've got to kind of evaluate, well, how good are they? Are they worth, do they beat the bookies at a better rate than I do? Is it worth me giving some of my money to them to get their results. And what some people don't quite understand is that that subscription fee that they're committing to paying is eating up their own profit margins. So quite often, we're not trying to rip on some of these subscription services when we say that, don't do it, especially if you're a small punter. And people will say, oh, a small punter needs the knowledge more than anyone. But let's all remember, it comes down to ROI, your return on investment. If you're someone who's betting $20-$50 a weekend, and you've got an ROI of 120%, you're getting 20% profit for every 50 you put down. That's great. So you're making, on average, $10 a weekend or $60 back for your 50. So over a month, you might make in the range of, $40 to $50, which is great for someone who's outlaying a small amount. Now, if that subscription fee is $50 a month, well, that's just wiped out your profit. Now you've got to hit 20% ROI, and I'm exaggerating. I don't think many people out there can hit 120% ROI long term. And that's wiped out. So really, it usually would be more justifiable for people who are outlaying large amounts of money, where that subscription fee is a quite insignificant amount of like one of their bets. And then they feel, well, if I can just flip one extra loser into a winner per month or whatever, it justifies my subscription fee. So keep that in mind that, of course, all these companies or these outfits will tell you that they're going to triple your money or 10 times your money. So any subscription fee is good. But the truth is, that even if you're getting, decent return on investment, 10 to 20% profit of your outlay, if you're not outlaying a lot of money, then your subscription fee could be the difference between being a winner or a loser in the course of a month. Of course, that depends on the results and it depends on how much they're charging. If they're saying they've got a certain winning percentage, we're 80, 90% winners, it doesn't sound very likely, but the first thing I would ask is, well, what odds are they tipping at, Anyone can actually tip 80 or 90% winners if you're only going to cherry pick and take, whatever, $1.10, locks in certain sports. Obviously, your NBAs and even your NFLs from time to time, you do get, very short price favorites, or especially in college sports where, you have the haves and the have-nots and you have mismatches. But if you're winning at 80%, but you're tipping at $1.10, you're losing money. So it's, that's why we've said, and I've actually written a full article about this, and I'll link that as well if you want to kind of elaborate on anything I'm saying now. But, winning percentage is actually a useless statistic without knowing what odds someone's tipping at. So, we always talk at the pod about how we've hit 60%, and I think we are still over 60%, and we are very close. Maybe even after tomorrow's pod on the NFL, we will have given out over 3,000 best bets, and the winning percentage is still over 60%. But we always explain that's against the spread. So that is always, and the average odds I think $1.89, but we're always trying to aim for that $1.92 and never lower than $1.80. So just always be aware that winning percentage goes hand in hand with what the odds you're giving out at. Conversely, someone who tips horses might only need to win at 20% if the average winner they're giving out is over $5. So the app kind of breaks that down where there's a pretty simple maths that, can convert a winning percentage and average winner odds into ROI, which is what, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do. Whether we're recreational, whether we're professional, we're still here because we want to win more money than we lose. So we want a positive return on investment. Back to 2020. Geez, I even had more hair just 2 years ago. You can, if you enjoyed that, as I said, there's about 20 of those episodes and they are all on YouTube. So just under this channel, Tripod Betting, just search Punting 101 and you can see, 5 to 15 minute theory videos, just our thoughts on several punting theory topics. Okay, changing pace now. As I said, it's fight night in Sydney, and I've got a couple of guys who have shared many tips over the years in the group who have confident picks for the fights tonight. So I just got them to give me super quick, less than 60 seconds breakdowns of their best bet for tonight and why. I want these pods to have a shelf life, so I'm not diving into like a heap of specific current events in these podcasts, but even if you are listening to this and it's Wednesday night has passed, you're listening on a Thursday, Friday, whatever, it might be interesting to hear their reasoning behind their pick, and then you can look it up and see if they were right or not. But otherwise, if you're watching this live, you've got the opportunity to jump on if you like the reasoning behind the pick. So here they are. Ben Williamson on the Gallen Hunt fight, followed by Tony Robert.
G'day champions, sorry about the head. I'll try and make up for it with a semi-decent tip. Just want to say love the group. Big fan of the work the boys have done in the Tripod page over the last couple of years. Down to one boy, or man beast now as it were, but champion stuff, big fan. For the Mark Hunt and Paul Gallen fights, I'm going to tip it to go the distance at $2.70 on Sportsbet, and I'll have beer money on Mark Hunt to win by points. Been a lot of talk about Mark Hunt knocking him out, and by all rights he should. Paul's athletic enough to dance around for a bit, and I think Mark's probably not going to go as hard as he's saying he will. These fights are generally a little bit fishy, so I take the good odds on it to go the distance, and then Mark Hunt to win by points at the end there. Good beauty.
Just in a fight this Wednesday with Bowen Morgan versus Tszyu. My pick is Bowen. I believe both fighters are very good. I've been keeping an eye on Bowen for a long time. I just didn't think he'd be fighting Tszyu this, his first fight in Australia. I believe both fighters are just as strong as each other. I believe if Bowen can keep the fight close, and he's got the better body shots over Tim, and then if he keeps fighting close, uses those body rips and stuff like that, he'll take the sting out of Tim's straight right. What we obviously have to be worried about. Obviously Bowen, he's more experienced. He's got a great amateur record. His professional career is 24-1, and the one fight he lost, he was actually dominating the fight, just got dropped by a haymaker. He's got the toughness, he's got the skills, and I believe he may be even fitter coming into this fight, because I believe looks like he's had a better camp. Tim looks like he's been living the high life after he beat Jeff Horn. So good luck if you get on. Bowen's paying between $8 and $10. Cheers.
So it doesn't get much more bold than that, picking a double-digit underdog in the boxing. We'll see how that turns out. Time for my wide world bet of the week, and it's not quite that bold odds, but it is nice juicy odds. Now, hands up, I completely shat the bed last week with my tip. It was the Brisbane Heat in their season opener of the Big Bash on Friday night to beat the Stars, and by a small margin as well. And they came out batted first, were useless and equally useless trying to defend a small total, and certainly made my pick look very bad. And I've said from the beginning, I'm not an expert in every sport that I'm going to share these tips. I try and use the marketplace as much as anything to educate me about what might be value. I looked at a team like the Brisbane Heat paying between $2.20, $2.30 head-to-head, and I thought that meant that they had a chance in that game, and we could get some value at $3.50. I was wrong. So we move on, and now we move to sport I do know a lot more about, so pressure is on. NFL. What's special about the NFL this week as we move into week 15 of 17 before the playoffs is there's a couple of Saturday night games in the States, and that is Sunday in Australia. So that's for a lot of the guys that work Monday to Friday. Now you've got the opportunity to catch a game or follow along on the weekend. So there's a double header. So I thought, why don't I create my Wide World Bet of the Week that combines these two games that give us a bit of interest on Sunday's NFL. So bear with me, it's a couple of steps to this bet, but basically the bet is the Carolina Panthers to lose to the Green Bay Packers, but still score more points than the Denver Broncos score against the Buffalo Bills. So there's a few layers to this pick. First of all, Green Bay playing lights out. Aaron Rodgers looking as good as he ever has in his career. Devontae Adams is probably as close as you can be to MVP for a wide receiver. Outstanding. That whole offense is absolutely gelling. And with the Saints losing last week, the Packers are now in a position where they can secure the all-important number 1 seed and solitary bye in the NFC. When a good team gets an opportunity like that, they don't let it slip. So I'm expecting an all-in performance at home from the Packers. I cannot see them losing. They are like $1.24, so they shouldn't lose at home to the Panthers. And I definitely see the matchup advantage being the Packers offense against the Carolina defense. But I do think Carolina can still put on some points here. I really respect their coach and especially their offensive coordinator. Thought they were a bit discombobulated last week coming off the bye and also having some COVID cases and players that were stood down for a certain number of days couldn't practice. I think they'll be a little bit more in sync this week. And while I don't think they'll win, I think it can be a high-scoring matchup. And I think Carolina could still be in the 20s in a loss. Before that game takes place, we have Denver against the Buffalo Bills. And the Bills have been very good to me with my NFL picks. And they're on the road here against a Denver side that is inconsistent, to say the least. And Denver got the upset last week, scored over 30 points. But I don't trust their offense. And I think Drew Lock's not that great. I think some of the stuff they do on offense is a bit smoke and mirrors. So basically, if we look at this Bills-Broncos matchup, I see the two possibilities. I think if Broncos keep it close, it's a lower scoring defensive style game. And if the Broncos can't keep it close, it's because they can't score enough points to keep with the Bills. So I like the Broncos to trend under maybe 20 points or less. That game's going to play out first. We're going to be cheering for minimal Broncos points as possible. The less they get, the more wiggle room we have in the second game, where we then need Carolina to score more than Denver did, but not win the game. Hope that makes sense. As I said with my reasoning of how the games play out, I think that's probably about a 50-50 really, whether Carolina scores more than Denver. And then we do need Carolina to lose, and it is inversely correlated. If they lose, they're probably not scoring as many, but as I laid out, I still think they could score quite a few, and it won't be as many as the Packers do, because I've really struggled to see Green Bay letting this one slip. So that's my Wide World Bet of the Week. Let's get after it. So if you like that tip or you want to jump on Top Sport, as I've said a few times, they support the show. We're halfway now. That was episode 8. Thanks for tuning in. I'm committed to 8 more, which is going to get us through to mid-February, and I'm going to have a tip like that every single week on Top Sport for a maximum bet $100, which is pretty decent for most punters, and always a bet that I truly believe is value. Lost last week, but remember, we're off back-to-back $3.50 winners. I almost forgot, I want to wish a very happy birthday to Benny Thomas, the one and only Tszyu man, probably doing a Tszyu right now as he's enjoying the pod. Shout out to Benny, all the great work he does with his crew, the Dark Horse Tipping Boys. We'll be back a week from now for Wide World of Punting episode 9. I've got a special guest. Should I give anything away? All right, I'll just say he's won the Dally M in the NRL before. So that's an exciting one. Thanks for tuning in. As always, guys, like, subscribe, comment, let me know if you enjoyed the pod. And I'll see you again next week. Always gamble responsibly. Lego.